Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tribal Council podcast, where on this podcast, Survivor represents our life, and when it is gone, so are we. My name is Ethan Kronk, and I'm joined by my co-host, Connor Boudreau. How are you doing today, Connor?
I'm doing pretty swell, and I think this is going to be a fun episode for the podcast. Some very interesting results that kind of fell into what we kind of talked about a couple episodes ago about people we thought might be eliminated, and I guess we were just a little early on the gun for that one, but yeah, it'll be exciting.
Yeah, so let's talk about Chrissy. Kind of unfortunate for her that she got paired up with Coach in this situation. Um, I don't think she would have gone home had she been paired up with anyone else necessarily. I mean, she was definitely not necessarily somebody that certain powerful people in the game, namely like I want to say it was Rick who was really pushing for her to go. No, because Rick was, who was it that was like really pushing for like um Chrissy's not a trustworthy player, basically. Was it Rizzo? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Talk
I
there.
definitely remember Cerise saying she needs to go because targeting Rizzo, but
Yeah, so I think I remember Rizzo talking to Joe because he wanted Joe to be on the same page and being like, and they were kind of going back and forth about it. Um, so it's definitely certain people really didn't want Chrissy around, but when you combine that with the fact that she was partnered up with Coach, who had pissed off Emily, who had pissed off Rick, who had pissed off Christian, who had pissed off probably probably Aubrey, Suri, Ozzy, almost everyone left in the game. Tiffany for sure. So this was a pretty like predictable outcome as far as um, which pair was going to go home. Considering it was probably two of the least insulated people on this cast overall paired up together. But I do think Chrissy, if she were paired up with someone else, could have potentially figured out a way to stick around. But yeah, being paired off with Coach was kind of, I think, the death nail for Chrissy. How did you feel about Chrissy this season, Connor?
I mean, unfortunately, Chrissy's screen time was super limited, and what we got of Chrissy's screen time a lot of the times was met with a either very oh it's kind of I don't care reaction or oh you're not in my favor reaction. So I guess the players didn't enjoy Chrissy as much as we could have got to. And I mean, I just thought it was interesting that the first person to get to our standards purpled in the new era was Chrissy.
Hmm. That is true. She did end her run on the season with 1.38 uh confessionals per episode, which is, you know, unfortunate. Uh it's kind of weird to think about Chrissy like in that way, considering there are other players like 2 seasons ago we had Chrissy who was pretty under-edited actually, and who went at around the same spot. Um which is kind of funny, but no, at the end of the day, yeah, not a lot to talk about with Chrissy considering she was so heavily under-edited. And just really was not well insulated on this season. Now let's talk about Coach. Drastically different story for Coach this season. 29 total confessionals is not certainly nothing to scoff at, and his presence was certainly felt this season. at times he was very entertaining, at times he was very annoying, and at times he was very poetic, even if he wasn't necessarily, you know, all that good at fifth grade poetry. Um, but like, I don't know, it's Coach. Yeah, I had a blast watching him play. But at a certain point, I'm kind of glad that he went where he did because I think he left just before he would have gotten annoying to me to the point where I wouldn't have found it entertaining anymore. Um, it is kind of like a flat note for Coach's probably Survivor career to end on. Um, but we had some truly epic episodes of Coach, especially these last couple of years, were just phenomenal. But what did you think about Coach, Connor?
I think weirdly, this was kind of like it started as one of my favorite versions of Coach. It went so high, and then we also got the lowest of low, in my opinion, of Coach. And I think this is my least favorite Coach by the end of the season that we've seen in Survivor. The haikus were kind of funny, like the first one, but the fact that it got to being like the entire like Chrissy arc of the entire episode was, hey, we got to contain Coach from sharing his haikus, meaning that he was just like doing so many that he genuinely pissed off like 10 other people by just saying haikus. Like, I was hoping for more something that like could be shown to the fans and we could be like, oh my god, this is so entertaining, I love this to death, and this is like my favorite thing ever. What we got is very much the opposite of that. And that it's just not what I wanted to see. I wanted to see Coach be fun, awesome, amazing, and like that be what got him screen time. And instead, we're getting people having to talk about, yeah, Coach was like pissing people off. And it's like, this is not what I was hoping to see. So it's just not the world that I wanted
I have a
from
very
Coach.
I have a very different opinion. I think I don't know if this was the best Coach season. Every single season, Coach brings something somewhat new, I think, and somewhat interesting to his character. And the fact that this season he was just so like okay, not only was he so like grating to the other players, but he was so just like how do I put this? Like people would tell him straight to his face, like, "Hey, you need to tone things down," and he would just have like this shit-eating grin, like he'd be like, "Oh, I need to tone things down, do I? Okay, let me just lay back in the hammock and oh." I think the funniest thing that Coach has maybe ever done was laying in the hammock and going, "I'll I'll just say my haikus quietly so no one can hear them." Like, bro is addicted to haikus. That's the story here. That's great. That's amazing. He cannot help himself but to do shitty haikus where he doesn't even get the syllables correct. And I think that compared like that tied with the fact that he like built up this like, oh, this is Coach 4.0. I'm suppressing the Dragon Slayer. I'm the Tide Walker now. And as soon, like literally the second he faces any amount of pressure whatsoever, he's like, you know what? The Dragon Slayer's coming out. Like, I don't know. This version of Coach was just like very bombastic, very deeply silly, and just like um just showed like the absolute upper limit of Coach's ability to piss off the other players. And you know, I mean, we've had like Tocantins Coach, which is probably like the most like authentic version of Coach, um, and just like the most kind of like enigmatic version. And then Heroes versus Villains, where I think the funniest thing about that was just Tyson having to lecture Coach to like not do Tai Chi and like not tell his stories because nobody believes them. There's no reason to tell them, and Coach is just like deeply upset. And then obviously South Pacific, where he starts a cult and like actually like kind of runs the game. Just every single version of Coach brings something unique, something interesting, and this version, in my mind, was no exception. Just like going to the extreme of just like pissing people off, especially obviously in the last couple episodes. And yeah, I like that. I like this version of Coach. I liked these couple episodes of just like true Coach unbridled insanity. Um that being said, out of the players left, surprise, surprise, the player that I feel has the lowest shot of winning the game at this point is still Tiffany. Um, 15 total confessionals. Uh, so she's not technically being purpled. That's about all I can say for her. She's got 3 confessional episodes still, which is just something that's never really going to leave her record, obviously, and is going to haunt her for the rest of the season. But since the merge, she's gotten fairly good, like, consistent content. I guess the only issue is just, like, that content has involved her being on the outs at the both the Camilla and the D votes. So that's not a great look. I think the only good thing that Tiffany has really going for her now is she has a relationship with Aubrey that's been very clearly established. She's kind of built a bridge with Joe, and that was sort of highlighted this episode, which I think is interesting. So there are relationships that she can fall back on, but aside from that, I just don't really see anything for to really say positively about Tiffany's edit. But I have found her very entertaining since we've actually started getting content from her. So I'm still happy that she's on the season. But what do you think about Tiffany, Connor?
Yeah, with Tiffany, again, as you said, since the merge, it's really been the Tiffany of old that we wanted to get back, and it's unfortunate we had to wait this long for the editors to go, oh wait, Tiffany's actually really fun to have on a screen. Crazy, it's almost like this was like some kind of hidden myth that we didn't know was supposed to exist, and all of a sudden it just showed up in our faces. In reality, it was always there, and it's the appeal of having someone like Tiffany back in the first place. Is she will shoot you straight, be a fairly solid player, and just be entertaining when on our screens in general. And yeah, again, if you look at the actual confessionals themselves, maybe they weren't necessarily the most like at its core, I guess, like impressive for like looking at winning odds. And if I'm not mistaken, all of them were like kind of again a negative towards her odds of winning until like the very last one. But I mean, again, just it's nice to have Tiffany on the screen.
Yeah, and like I don't know, just I feel like her crash outs this season have been legendary. Um, that's the main thing. Aside from like, I think she's a good player. I think like she's probably in a decent position actually at this point now that she's been able to take out Coach and Chrissy, and I think Joe legitimately kind of wants to work with her, so that's kind of an in on. She kind of has some ins on both of the major alliances. So honestly, like I don't think that she's doing too terribly for herself this season, aside from the fact that she was left out at 2 votes in a row, which is obviously not good objectively. But at the end of the day, 3 confessional episodes. The fact that so much of the content that she has gotten has just been her being upset about being left out, which has been entertaining, but not quality content for odds of winning. Just keep her pretty firmly at the bottom of this list. But now for somebody who hasn't necessarily been quite so low as he is now in previous episodes, I actually have Joe Hunter. Why don't you take the floor and get us started talking about Joe, Connor?
I mean, for starters, when you're looking at Joe, this was the first time since the original Tribes where he's had more than 2 confessionals in an episode. And it makes you think, okay, so clearly this must have been a good episode for Joe. Well, it was the opposite. If you go to the very last moment of Joe that you get in the episode, it's out of principle, I will not write Coach's name down. What does he do? Writes Coach's name down. Okay, let's go back to the fact that he won the challenge. Great for him. However, what does he do with the fact that he's immune? Doesn't attempt to leverage it, doesn't attempt to really control the vote, doesn't use some kind of social prowess to navigate this round. He basically just says, I want Devins and Aubrey, and it's not going my way all of a sudden. Aw, shucks. And he tries to try and push things back the right way, but it's not really shown enough that we can take it seriously, I find. And the only person that really acknowledges this is Stephanie in confessional. So it immediately comes back to Joe, and he says, basically, this is what I want now.
Yeah.
And then yet again, he doesn't even vote this.
here's what I'll say about here's what I've learned about Joe and his refusal to vote for Coach is that he actually didn't write Coach's name down originally. He just wrote Chrissy's, and when his vote was revealed, or not when his vote was revealed, when Jeff was like tallying the votes, he made Joe like redo his vote to include Coach. Now, how old is Coach? Or sorry, how old is Joe? I want to say he's like 48 or not. Maybe not quite that old. Maybe a little bit younger than that. What am I thinking? Like 40.
I want to say 45, 46.
Joe.
Mid 40s.
Yeah, definitely in his 40s. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, he's mid 40s. I know that
much. So for a man in his mid 40s, he really has, yeah, for a 46-year-old man, he has a pretty juvenile understanding of honesty, I think. Like, saying that you're going to refuse to put Coach's name down and then voting for Chrissy, which is ostensibly a vote for Coach, is kind of like saying that you have honor and integrity because when you make a promise that you don't plan on keeping, you cross your fingers behind your back. It's just like this very like it's just like this very like faux honesty that like kind of pisses me off. But I guess he's taking a page out of Coach's book because that's the exact type of stunt that Coach would pull. Oh, I refuse to vote for this person out of principle, and then like basically votes for them, just doesn't literally physically write their name down. It's, I don't know, it's so goofy to me. But you know, I aside from that, Joe this episode, he made it very clear what he wanted, and he didn't get it. And he just hasn't been a super relevant person this season, so most of the content he has gotten has been kind of dunking on him, and yeah, just not great. Not a great episode for him, despite getting a little bit more content from him than usual. So he kind of finds himself down here at the bottom of the list. Next up, though, I have Stephanie LaGrossa Kendrick. Stephanie, I think the only relevance she's had was her little journey where she, held her arm up for, I forget how long. Like, it was a long ass time. How long did she have her arm up? Do you remember, Connor?
1 hour.
1 hour. That is a very long time to hold your arm up. An hour doesn't sound super long, but to stay in one position and she got some like inspirational content surrounding that, but I felt like that was a little bit circumstantial, if anything. And then she gets back, lies about earning an advantage, and is immediately clocked by Suri. So, I don't know. That just didn't actually feel like amazing content for her. It felt like the positive aspect of the content were like, this is going to be shown no matter how Stephanie does, ultimately. And then we kind of got some negativity alongside it with Suri just immediately being like, yeah, I know that she's lying about not having an advantage. And all in all, when that's the only thing that Stephanie can really hang her hat on, that I can put my finger on in the edit, it just doesn't give me a lot of confidence in her. Now, mind you, the person I have just right above her on this list, I could say maybe has more negative aspects to Reddit, so that's these two, I could go either way on them, but at the end of the day I chose to put Stephanie here at number 9, I believe. But what do you think about Stephanie?
I mean, if it's any consolation, that's old news. That's not even from this episode. That's like how little of relevance she's had in this episode, is that you're not even remembering that was from an old episode.
No, I know that it was from last episode. I just mean in general, that's the only like meaningful content she's gotten this entire season.
Fair. I mean, this episode she kind of got nothing. Literally one of her confessionals was her saying, "Oh wow, Joe's saying Devon's and Aubrey. They're in the middle. I get it. What better chance do we have to get rid of 2 people?" Like the last thing we get pretty much before Tribal is starting, and it clearly isn't taken very seriously. And yeah, I can't really add much else other than I have fun facts. First fun fact for this podcast episode: for any of you that have played the Survivor: The Tribe Has Spoken card game, which released about a year ago now, the yellow pairing for that game is coincidentally Ozzy and Stephanie. During this double duo twist, they were the yellow pair. I mean, pretty crazy, huh?
And you know what? They were... That just kind of made me think about the fact that aside from Tiffany and Joe, who are obviously immune, Ozzy and Stephanie and Jonathan Christian were the only 2 pairs that I don't think were ever mentioned as targets. So, all 4 of those players might be in fairly decent positions in the game. Just something to think about. But I didn't even realize that they were like a pairing in the card game. Like I own the card game courtesy of my boy Connor here, but I don't think about Stephanie and Ozzy as like a pair, probably because they've never played together until season 50. So I always forget that they're paired up for the card game for some reason. It's weird.
I mean, that's the most random of the pairs I find, but
it's like the pair for like Facebook moms, basically, I guess. Essentially.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of makes sense.
So, moving on to Emily Flippen, financial analyst Emily Flippen. I would say that she has more going for her than Stephanie. Obviously, she has more content in general. I think that some of the, like, her very early content was actually pretty good, like the first 2 episodes. And then recently, her kind of just like hating Coach kind of pays off this episode with Coach going home, I guess. Aside from that, like, who was Emily paired with, actually? I forget. Rizzo, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and Emily wasn't so much a target, but Rizzo was, so that kind of put her in the crosshairs. I guess one negative thing I can say about Emily this episode was that she got the least amount of confessionals of anyone, despite technically being a potential target. So that kind of sucks. And again, it, I think pretty clearly, demonstrates why she's as low on the list as she is. She could potentially even be put lower, and I would not necessarily find that too difficult to reconcile. I just have her a little bit higher than Stephanie and Joe and Tiffany, just because I feel like she has more of a foundation for a story, I guess, than those three players. She also hasn't had a single zero confessional episode, so that's definitely not a terrible thing for her to hang her hat on. But at the end of the day, her edit definitely is not good, and I think she kind of rounds out the pretty definitive bottom four, in my opinion. But what do you think about Emily?
Yeah, I think it's also an interesting thing that this is one confessional from Emily. Do you remember when the confessional happens?
Not really. I kind of
It
don't.
happens right after they get back from the challenge, before she finds out she's being targeted.
Yeah.
She says she wants to get rid of Coach and Chrissy.
Hey.
After she's shown on screen being told she's being targeted, we do not see her talk.
Hey, at least she's like one of the first people to go Coach and Chrissy. That's something at least. But the fact that she gets nothing after being like pointed out as a potential target is pretty dire. They could you could write it off as them like protecting her, but protecting her from what? She didn't go home, so like it was fine.
How many votes did she get?
Did she even get any? I don't. One, right? Because didn't
one singular vote from Chrissy, because Chrissy had to vote someone and just decided not to vote the same as Jonathan.
Well, she wanted Rizzo Emily out. Did she think that was like the plan going into tribal council? I wonder. Like it's always weird to me when people just like vote for the person that they want out, knowing full well that nobody else is voting with them. I don't know. It's just kind of a silly decision. But we're not talking about Chrissy anymore. We're talking about Emily. And yeah, you do raise a good point. The fact that she just doesn't get a confessional after being brought up as a target is really not a good look at all. It kind of reminds me of Stephanie not being a target for the Mike vote, but being a key part of the Mike vote and like a key person who's pulled in for the Mike vote and not getting a single confessional after that plan was brought up. It's a similar concept where like they might have gotten confessionals this episode, but not where they actually really counted or mattered. So, yikes.
And to that point, at least Stephanie got like a multitude of confessionals in the lead up to that, and like there was something there. But it's still, again, if you're in a pivotal role of a vote, you should explain this. It makes more sense for the viewers, both the casual and the more dedicated viewers. This is even worse. You find out you're going to be potentially targeted, because the person you're going after is targeting you. You know, that's a big deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that is rough. So, yeah, definitely I think that the bottom four that I have here is like pretty definitive. You could potentially switch up the order a little bit. I think Tiffany kind of belongs at the bottom no matter what, but aside from that, the Joe, Stephanie, Emily could be pretty interchangeable, but definitely those four are pretty definitively for me the bottom four, no questions asked. So there's a decent gap between Emily and our next contestant, Rick Devens. And I don't know, Rick doesn't really land this low because his edit is particularly terrible. It just doesn't have much specifically going for it. Like, I think about the couple people I have above him that you could argue are somewhat interchangeable with him, and I think I can point to more reasons why they would make sense as a winner than Rick. And it's unfortunate because I like Rick a lot, and his edit isn't even like outright bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not necessarily good either. It's kind of just fine. And you'd think that would mean that like the players this season all have like phenomenal edits, but that's kind of the case of like almost all of the players. From Rick to number one, like none of them are like standing out to me as like this is like a phenomenal edit. But yeah, Rick's is just the one that I'm the most kind of meh on at the end of the day. But maybe Connor has more insight into Rick's edit.
Yeah, so a couple things that I'm gonna shed some light to that are definitely more positives and potentially why I have them a little bit higher than you. One, we finally get some of at least the beginning of the payoff to the fake idol play. Which is going to be very interesting to see how that builds to. He does also mention this as the very last confessional before we actually get into Tribal Council itself. Is Rick says, and I quote, "One thing I always have is a fake idol at Tribal just waiting to be used, calling my name. But I am only using that in total desperation." And that's where I think you can look at it and go, okay, double-edged sword here. He legitimately thought he had to potentially pull that out of the bag, or he might have legitimately gone home. And that's where I go, okay, I think that's a bit of a misread, but at the end of the day, I completely get it. He probably heard his name a lot, and it makes some sense to use it. He plays the lie pretty well too to Aubrey of like a haha, I can't play it right now. Here's why I'm holding it, even though I could be a target. But again, aside from this confessional, he doesn't get to talk after the challenge result. All of his content from this episode is prior, and a lot of it is fairly narrative content, right? So, weirdly, Rick is kind of on the back burner right now for me. That being said, the fact that he still is getting consistent content aside from the 0, I mean, he's averaging almost 4 an episode. It's pretty solid. And again, like you said, there's just probably a few more positive things that we could say about certain players above him. But that being said, I still even have him a little bit higher than you do.
Here's another thing about Rick. I think it's funny that everybody in the game pretty much thinks that Rick has found 2 idols now, when he hasn't found a single one. Just thought I'd throw that out. Well, assuming they believe the fake tribal idol. I don't know that everybody's actually gonna believe in it, but everybody thought that he found the idol that was sent to Aubrey because for some reason, well, no, I kind of get it. I kind of get why him and Christian decided to lie about that. But then he also finds this idol at Tribal Council, so now everybody thinks that he's found 2 idols already on season 50. Here comes Rick Devens again, the idol king, finding 2 idols 8 episodes in, and he hasn't found a single one.
And yet,
pretty
also,
iconic.
Shout out Genevieve for actually finding 2 idols
Yeah,
on season 50.
that's
Not
true.
even being here to do a fucking thing about it. That is a poetic moment of justice for Genevieve. She found 2, did not get to tell anyone that, oh hey, by the way, I found 2. And then Rick is being blamed for 2 idols being in circulation, neither of which are his fault.
One of which isn't even real.
Yeah, and one of which got played. So
2
idols that he also can't use.
I guess the only... Oh, yeah. At this point, it's just Ozzy and Rizzo who each have idols, right? So maybe
The Wizard of Oz.
there's yet time for Rick to actually find an idol, because I'm sure there will be a merged idol of some sort. Anyways, next up I have Aubrey Bracco, and Aubrey, much like Rick, is somebody who, I mean, honestly, for the longest time I was not very high on Aubrey. I found her edit to be kind of one note and not even necessarily in a positive sense. Especially with her like rivalry with Genevieve. I didn't think the payoff to that was very satisfying for Aubrey's edit or her story. If she's gonna be the winner of the season, so that didn't make me feel very good about her odds. And then, all in all, I don't know. She's just kind of been around, but she's gotten these like glimpses at like a potential winner's edit where she's talking about how she needs to like step her game up. I don't know, a lot of content like that where she's just like, I need to like step my game up, I need to kick it into high gear and like really start playing. And that is kind of like a bit of a winning like moment to be like, oh, my game so far has been kind of just whatever. I'm gonna put my foot on the gas and start really playing. I'm just hoping to see the follow through of that sometime sooner rather than later. Otherwise, Aubrey might start to slip back down this list. But for me, like, that's just the little bit that she needed to kind of edge out players like Rick, who just don't really have anything specific to point to as like a reason why they could make sense as a winner. But what do you think about Aubrey so far, Connor?
I think Aubrey kind of had a bit of a slow burn, and we were just waiting for the situation for Genevieve to kind of subside before we could really get into why Aubrey is an important character for the season. And it's the reason I don't think I can say Aubrey is a clear frontrunner enough to put them in my top 4 at this current point in time, but definitely why they're in a good spot going forward is Aubrey has a lot of great connections. You know, with Devons, they just got paired with them for a very difficult round to navigate, so there's some clear rapport there on top of the already fabricated idol situation, which also attaches her to Christian, and somewhat by extension Emily, which can technically be somewhat by an extension to Ozzy, and then now Cirie. So there's a bit of a, entanglement of characters that can kind of attach themselves to Aubrey. However, part of that list also includes Cirie and Ozzy, which isn't necessarily a good thing because, well, that's basically just Cirie and Cirie's sidekick in terms of strategic play. But also importantly, Aubrey has found ways to also just get, again, very entertaining content in very snappy ways that I don't know if it helps in the edit, but fuck, it's fun to see on my screen.
I felt like for most of the season, Aubrey just feels like she doesn't want to be there, which is not the vibe that I want from someone who, could potentially go on to win the season.
I mean, hey, she kind of feels like the grouchy old lady in like a good way, you know?
Yeah. I just haven't found her to be as entertaining as she has been in the past, like on Ko Wrong or, even Game Changers. But at the end of the day, she's here, and she's not in a terrible position at this point, being in on the Coach and Chrissy elimination, having quite a few potential connections, as you said, especially since she did actually have that connection with Coach that could potentially help her, with connection with Joe or Jonathan, or Stephanie. But at the end of the day, oh, and obviously she has a pretty strong connection actually with Tiffany. So Yeah, she's not in a bad position, and she has something in her head to point towards a potential win, but she also has some kind of just weirdness to her head that keeps her from really cracking the top 4 or even top 5 of my list at the end of the day. But just barely cracking the top 5, and somebody it feels a little bit interchangeable with Aubrey to me. Jonathan Young. Not a great episode for Jonathan, being the sole vote for the Rick and Aubrey pairing there. But I do think that something that's worth noting is the fact that it was left kind of up in the air what was going to happen going into Tribal, to the point where you could say, oh, Rick's fake idol play, that's why Rick and Aubrey, didn't go home. It might not be true necessarily, but you leave that possibility there, and it actually reflects more positively on Jonathan. So even though he didn't get what he wanted, obviously, I do think that the edit kind of helped him a little bit, in the sense that it left enough plausible doubt that Rick and Aubrey would have survived had Rick not pulled off his stunt at Tribal Council, that you can say, okay, well, it's not really Jonathan's fault. It's not like he couldn't get the numbers. And at the end of the day, he's been like quite a front runner to me for a while now, and he is starting to slip back down. But the fact that he was able to get Camilla and Dee out back to back was definitely impressive. The fact that he is as much of a character on the season as he is, despite being Jonathan, honestly, is something that you kind of have to look at. Like, I wouldn't expect Jonathan to be getting 21 confessionals, and I know that's not like a ton. It's not breaking any records by any means, but like, I expect someone like Jonathan to kind of fade into the background a little bit more than he is. So, especially given he hasn't even won a challenge yet. So, that's kind of another thing pointing for Jonathan at this point. But for points against him, just generally being not necessarily portrayed as the most likable character this season, and that's usually not a good sign in and of itself. So I'm kind of conflicted on Jonathan, but what do you think about him, Connor?
Jonathan is probably the biggest disagreement between my list and your list this week. I'm much lower on Jonathan, and I think the biggest things that I looked at when I was evaluating it was, one, as you mentioned, 21, that's a lot. You take out the merge episode, it's barely over half of that. Like, he had 8 in the merge episode. It's just not a full edit for him, I find, outside of basically one episode. And again, this is his, tied for second largest. But again, you look at where his confessionals lie in the episode. I can't remember quite when the first one is. I want to say he gets at least one the night following. And then his latest confessional into the episode is him saying Rick Devens is dangerous before the challenge happens, mind you, because of him being able to find idols. Which, again, we've already spoken to how ironic this is this season. But that's all he gets by way of explanation for what he's thinking for this entire round strategically. Again, after the challenge, we don't hear him talk. That, to me, was like a big, whoa, okay. We don't get a thorough explanation other than just something he says like 45 minutes ago as to why he voted the way he did, which was, I guess, technically incorrect. Sure, he was never going to vote Coach and Chrissy.
Outside of confessionals, though, like, he was talking to people about how, like, we need to gun for the people who are in the middle, how they're gonna take control of the game if we don't take them out sooner rather than later, and like,
fair point. But I'll even argue that he's also mislabeled who's in the middle.
I mean, yeah, sort of, like, but at the end of the day, like, that is the pretty, like, consensus kind of what everybody back at camp has agreed on as for who's in the middle. And even if technically speaking, it's probably more of like the Suri Aussie Rizzo alliance that's in the middle. Just because nobody knows that doesn't mean that everybody who's not in that alliance automatically uh, is like being edited negatively. It's just more of a, I guess, positive for those three. Um,
I wasn't even thinking from the editing standpoint. I was just thinking from the strategic standpoint of the game. If there's just a certain loop of people that are so far out that only the people in the alliance are in the know, I look at that as more just again, three people have pushed themselves to a different level that separates themselves from where Jonathan can be. And I feel like there's only one person who's remarkably noticed it enough to put themselves in the same tier, relatively. But we'll get into that later.
yeah, I mean, I just think like at the end of the day, I don't place too much on the fact that he's like technically wrong about who is or is not in the middle. Like the overwhelming consensus at camp is that that is sort of those are sort of the players who are quote unquote in the middle. And you know, him pointing out, hey, two of them are in a group together. We can kill two birds with one stone here. Like, let's not overcomplicate things. And pushing for that kind of makes sense.
He doesn't even get a confessional about it though, and that's the big concern I get with it. Biggest bit of pushback, I guess, is just
But he's still talking about it.
get
Like,
one confessional.
it doesn't like it doesn't matter if it's in a confessional or if it's in a conversation at camp. Really, like at the end of the day, he had tons of conversations at camp that were shown. So it's kind of
Yeah,
you're kind of
but-
splitting hairs over like, oh, it's a confessional, oh, it's a conversation with somebody else at camp. Like at the end of the day, he talked about it. So, I mean, it just feels like a little bit unnecessarily like pedantic to me to like again split hairs over whether or not it was in confessional or whether or not it was in a conversation. But I mean, at the end of the day, he's still not gonna be cracking my top four by any means. You know, partially for some of the reasons that you've mentioned. Um, so at the end of the day, that does land him just barely in my personal top five. But now to kind of move up a tier on my rankings, and we have the final four, not necessarily of the season, but of my rankings. Do you want to take this one, Connor?
I mean, I think you all know at home why I've been told to start this one. The man, the myth, the legend, RIZ, Riz, God, baby. It's your boy, Rizzo, cracking the top four. Where I could be wrong, unless someone crazy, pulls some massive move. I don't think he'll leave either of our top fours for the rest of the season. And that's pretty awesome. In my opinion, Rizzo's comments earlier in the season about back-to-back players typically doing good or bad wasn't necessarily exactly true in the grander scheme of things. However, he is proving to be part of the better half of that statistic, and I am absolutely loving every second of it. If we look at just from this and a little bit of last episode, again, he is building himself a great set of evenly balanced confessionals, not too high, not too low. This episode, just the three, but a pretty important set, I guess, of pivotal confessionals, all of which come after the challenge and are important to how he progresses in this episode. We start off with him talking about his role in the game and how he's trying to navigate becoming the middle, which I feel like, he is in the middle quite well, very hidden. And this is really the first time that his name kind of gets brought up in a sense of like, oh my god, he's actually gonna go home since Charlie. So he managed to find his way under the radar for quite a while after being a vote or two away from going home. And then his last couple confessionals are talking about, all right, who wants to vote me? Oh, Chrissy? All right, let's get her out then. And then trying to pull in an ally that he has, build a relationship with a player and get an opinion on it. Again, a great thing to have happen. Which looks even better from the fact that although Joe did not want to write Coach's name, he does end up agreeing to what Rizzo had originally proposed to him. So, all in all, I think fantastic episode for the Riz God. Still has his idol. Still has a super well hidden trio that shouldn't be well hidden, but by God it is.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to point out was that despite the fact that we as the audience are perceiving this Wizard of Oz alliance to be in the middle, Rizzo this episode does say that he kind of wants like initially he wants Rick and Aubrey out because he feels they're playing the middle and that's the position that he wants to be in. So even the people who we perceive as being in the middle perceive those players as that group as being in the middle. So like as far as who's in the middle, who isn't, I do think that it's a little bit nebulous. And that's just something I wanted to point out while I was kind of looking at Rizzo's content this episode. But all in all, definitely a great episode for Rizzo. Aside from the fact that he does start out kind of swing out of the gate, wanting Rick and Aubrey gone, and he does change his mind when he starts to be targeted by Chrissy, and ultimately gets what he wants in the end. But sorry. But the fact that he starts off targeting someone else is really the one and only thing I can point out this episode that could potentially be perceived as negative for Rizzo. Aside from that, just a solid episode for Rizzo, and that's all he really needed to stay here in the top 4. And yeah, I'm excited to see how things go for him moving forward. I also, when he said "girl, bye," I thought that was funny. It just felt kind of unnatural coming from him, but it's okay. He's the Riz God. He can say whatever he wants.
Unnatural? Are you kidding me? No, Rizzo pulled it off. I completely disagree with that. I thought that was so Rizzo. I thought that was perfect from him. And considering that's the last thing we hear from him until we get to Tribal Council, I think it's perfect. I think it caps off a great Rizzo episode.
Girl, bye. At number 3, I have Ozzy Lust, the guy who has, kind of been at my top spot for the last few episodes. I actually think this was a pretty not great episode for Ozzy, all things considered. I think just the fact that he was so heavily... It was just kind of shoved in our face that Ozzy cannot play this game without Cirie. Was really... I don't know, pretty bad. Bad enough to drop him 2 spots on this list, right? And, he's still in the top 4. He's still in a great position with Cirie and Rizzo. And, having his separate alliances with, Emily as well. And, by extension, Christian and Rick. But, just the fact that he was like, oh, what would Cirie do? She totally gunned for Rick and Aubrey, and then Cirie gets back and she's like, no, we're not doing that. And I do like that he was like, thank God, because I was gonna look like an idiot. We should do what Cirie wants to do because she's a lot smarter at the strategy than I am. At least the fact that he's self-aware is probably a good thing. But the fact that it took Cirie coming and telling him exactly what needed to be done for him to even come to the correct conclusion, or supposedly the correct conclusion. It's just, in my opinion, not a good look at all. So unfortunately, Ozzy has dropped from the top spot. Because yeah, that's probably like the biggest. That was probably the biggest negative in Ozzy's edit thus far, and it was just really highlighted this episode to a point where it became impossible for me to ignore. But what do you think about Ozzy this episode, Connor?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. The biggest thing with what I see from Ozzy this episode that really sticks out to me is the first time we see Ozzy appear on our screen in confessional form is him giving a statement on how, he feels like since the merge, he's been in the middle. Great. Second thing he says, coach is on my hit list, but I've got to stay, close with him, and we're going to hit him when he least expects it. And then they immediately take him out that exact same episode less than 24 hours later. So it kind of felt weird, I guess, that it was edited that way. Like, I feel like at some point he had to have said some other variation of let's just get rid of coach today. Oh wait, they showed that still. So then why did they say let's get him when he least expect it and then immediately turns around and will take the loud approach? I don't know. That seemed kind of weird. Just wanted to point that out. Aside from that, I think you kind of nailed it on the head of Ozzy being so aware of the fact that he is not good at deciding who to target when to target them. It's always been an Ozzy flaw. At least he's now capable of having someone to help him navigate that important part of the game. And, I mean, he can't rely on Suri forever if he wants to actually win. But he can kind of ride her coattails for a long time and get away with it, I think. So I am not entirely worried about it. The biggest thing that really strikes me as something of a bit of surprise so far, nobody's really brought up Ozzy as a threat the same way that you always have had Ozzy brought up as a threat. Obviously, he's not the same challenge beast he used to be. Fuck, he couldn't even beat Coach in a challenge on day, 2, 1?
I
To
mean,
grab speed. That's something that he had a massive lead on. He
yeah,
should have always won, and Coach just kind of snaked him at the end, sure. But
yeah. I mean, he kind of got a little bit finessed, and he has won like one of the 2 individual immunities already, which is not like he's probably not the challenge beast he was, but he's still really good at challenges.
and
For
yet
sure.
nobody's talked about it.
Yeah, but who talks about who in like the last? Okay, that's maybe not a good question to ask because I'll get my answer. But challenge beasts just aren't really like talked about like that anymore. Like they are, right? Like Kyle on 47 was definitely targeted as a challenge beast. Pretty specifically.
I'll make the argument you go back to 46 as well. That's kind of a prevalent thought. Heck, you look at last season. It's not necessarily the reason that Savannah's being targeted, but it's definitely mentioned when people are bringing up Savannah's name.
Yeah.
So, like, I would say it is definitely still relevant. It's just looked at in a very different way, but it's not being looked at all. Ozzy's not being brought up at all.
Okay,
It's
but
been
who?
a while since we heard someone say, let's target Ozzy. And none of Ozzy's allies are being targeted either. So, to an extent, I guess that's not necessarily Ozzy's fault that our allies aren't being targeted.
I mean,
However,
Rizzo was targeted this most recent episode.
okay, sure, but nobody knows that they're working together. So I guess, correction to my point, his known allies aren't being targeted because of Ozzy. There is no association of, oh, let's target this person to target Ozzy, or let's target Ozzy to target this person. It isn't really some kind of attack on him and his game the same way that you're used to seeing with Ozzy, where it's like, okay, Ozzy's a big threat. We have to get rid of him, or maybe he has an idol, so let's target that person instead. There is no mention of it. Even with him having an idol that everyone knows about, nobody's going after Ozzy. And that's weirdly astonishing to me.
Well, I mean, to me, that would just signify that people just don't necessarily respect Ozzy this season enough to see him as a threat. Because,
And
like,
thus he's sliding under the radar a little bit because he has
I mean, that's
the
kind of.
guidance of one of the Survivor greats to help elevate him so that by the end of it, maybe he does have a case to argue, yeah, I was actually a pretty good player this year.
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like asking why Ozzy hasn't been brought up as like a big threat is kind of like asking why Xander was never really brought up, despite everybody knowing that he had a public idol on season 41. Like the genuine literal answer is probably just that he doesn't have much of a winning case if he makes it to the end, so nobody's really worried about him making it to the end. And I mean, it's Ozzy. He doesn't have a great social or strategic reputation, and he's not really proving himself this season, given all of his strategic decisions are being made by someone else. So I just struggle to see this, like, him not being targeted or like seen as like a threat as like a positive for him. Um, Necessarily, but especially like if we're gonna talk about like who who do people see as Ozzy's allies? I guess Cirie, Emily, but I don't know. It's just I feel like that's more of a negative, if anything, than a positive, in my opinion. Because it kind of portrays him as like almost impotent. Whereas when you look at like the last few winners, all of them have been kind of called out as a threat in some form or another at some point during their seasons. Even going back to like Kenzie super early on was like, oh, this girl's like potentially a threat to win the game. So I don't know. If anything, I kind of view that as a negative for Ozzy's edit and a justification for dropping him down to number 3 in a sense, but that's just my personal opinion on that. But moving on and talking about Christian Hibiki. Honestly, I just think Christian had a really good episode, and like he's had enough episodes now in a row of like middle of the road amount of content to where the concern about him being overexposed isn't as much of a thing now. Like, I mean, Ozzy's leading now 3 confessionals ahead of him. Christian only got 3 confessionals, 2 confessionals last episode, but he's still getting good content. He was very, adamant about wanting Coach and Chrissy out, but he was like, it's not fully in my control, so we'll see what happens. But that's where I'm pushing, and that's what ended up happening. So he's still being portrayed as like a powerful player, or at least a player with agency, and who's in the power dynamic. He's yet to really be on the wrong end of a vote at this point, so that's definitely a good sign for him. And that bombastic pre-merge leading into kind of a quieter early merge could be a decent winning formula if his content starts to pick up again, kind of going into the late merge. But at the end of the day, this wasn't an insane episode for Christian. He didn't get like a ton of super fun or awesome Christian content. But he was happy to see Cirie come back. He was happy to see Coach and Chrissy go home. And yeah. What do you think about Christian this episode, Connor?
Not only was he happy to see Cirie come back, in that confessional, he says a couple things that really strike my attention and really elevate him in my mind at this point as a player. He says, quote, "Thank God Cirie's back. Thank everything. Thank the Survivor gods. She finds some way off Exile Island and back to us. He then continues and ends with, because I don't have all the power, but now here comes the cavalry, it's Suri. He's the first person to specifically identify her as the person with the largest say in the season. Anytime she said someone's going home, they've gone home. And he's the first person to point this out. I get it's a small thing. It may just be he said it and it sounded interesting, so they left it in the edit. So I'm not looking into it too much yet, but it's there. If it comes down to Christian trying to take out Suri later, we've seen glimpses of it now, where he's at least thought of her as the person with the most power here, or enough power to make the decisions for a majority at this point in the game. And I think that's a really, really good thing to have him say first, given, again, he's already been such an important vocal feature in almost every episode of the entire season, barring the last episode. Arguably, that's kind of it. And even then, his hand was in the cookie jar to an extent. Plus, his faux idol play that was organized amongst him and Devins is now coming into play. And as much as that is more, than anything a Devins thing, his attachment to it is still present. He is the only other person who knows the value of said idol and how much weight it holds, given that it's not real, and what leverage to do with it. And it's just so many small little things that add up to really elevate Christian, even with the previous concerns of him just being too much content on our screens. It's slowly dying out, and in a way that I think Christian could pick it back up at the right time to be the winner of the season.
Yeah, although I am kind of starting to miss Christian. Like I'm starting to miss just having him constantly on my screen for 7, 8, 10, 6 confessionals an episode. So hopefully, no, I'm kind of hoping that next episode he gets a little bit more.
I mean, hey, we got 3 incredible Christian confessionals this episode. I have no complaints.
Fee fi fo
I
fum.
mean, yeah. Also, this is Double Trouble, Boil, and Bubble Twist. Also, Christian's... where was it? The Brochachos are back. That was a really cool little tidbit on that.
Oh, it's a reference,
confessional.
guys. It's a reference.
So, just all in all, everything we got out of Christian was just so entertaining. Even if it is 3, it was 3 great ones.
Yeah, not really a single miss as far as his confessionals. Not a single, meh confessional. They were all good, so I'll take it. But that, at the end of the day, is everyone, aside from my number 1 at this point in the game, and the person I'm probably rooting for the most at this point in the game, Suri Fields. Honestly, if anyone in my top 4 wins, I'll be fairly happy. Even Ozzy is somebody I wasn't necessarily excited to see back, but having seen him play so far, it's my favorite iteration of Ozzy by far. And also, I saw a post about how if Ozzy wins this season, then the hot tub scene from Survivor Cook Islands with Ozzy, Parvati, and Yule, all 3 people in that hot tub will be Survivor winners. So that would be cool. That's an iconic scene. And yeah, but at the end of the day, all 4 players I'd be happy to see win, but Suri, throughout Survivor history, has been somebody who's just consistently deserved this win and just has come up just short multiple times, and for varying degrees of ridiculous reasons. So really this just feels like a perfect opportunity for Suri to finally get her coronation. And I feel like the edit is definitely supporting Suri as probably the biggest threat on this island without necessarily being perceived as the biggest threat. And I think that's the big difference between someone like Suri and Ozzy, is that Suri is being portrayed as somebody who people aren't targeting, who people aren't necessarily viewing as a threat, but she is being shown as a threat. She is being shown as somebody who's making decisions and forming connections like left, right, and center. Whereas Ozzy isn't necessarily being shown in that same light. He's not being shown as somebody who is a threat despite not being perceived as one. He's just kind of not being shown as a threat at all. Suri, great content this episode. Journey, obviously pretty circumstantial, but the fact that, like you said, Christian pointed her out as like, oh, she's the cavalry. She's here to sway things over to my side. Well, it is the slight wrinkle in the fact that Suri's not necessarily being perceived as this massive threat. It is still good content. The fact that, you know, she's being portrayed as this person who can really just make things happen. And Ozzy worshipping the ground that she walks on, not bad content either, in my opinion. So all in all, Suri just got a phenomenal episode this time around, and she had a really good episode last time. And I just, at the end of the day, it just felt right putting her here at number one. But what do you have to say about Suri, Connor?
I mean, I just 3 specific things came to mind as to why this is like one of the best 3 episodes you're ever going to see of Survivor. First things first, for the first time in Suri's Survivor career, she had individual immunity. Believe it or not, the first time she's ever had it. That is a monumental moment that no one can ever take away from her. And it's all because Coach drew her shot in the dark out of a bag. So, Coach gave Suri individual immunity, confirmed. Second thing I wanted to point out, she got 5 straight confessionals, I think it was. She gets back from Exile Island, goes to Exile Island, gets like 5 straight confessionals. It is a thing of beauty. We just got so much Suri time, and I get it's forced because she has the little Exile journey twist, you know. But like, it's such good, beautiful, emotional content. It really builds Suri again as the super rootable, lovable character we all know and love. And yet, she still gets solid content when she gets back. She still gets to talk about why she's targeting, who she's targeting, and then calls the shots. Again, nailing it, never failing, and ultimately, in the most Suri way possible, dragging her allies through it to one save one and completely correct the guidance of the other. So, all in all, I don't know much else that could have gone right for Suri this episode. And anyone that doesn't have Suri, 1, 2, and maybe at lowest 3 after this episode on their win rankings, I don't trust your list.
Those are some fighting words. I could see her anywhere in the top 4 personally, but at the end of the day, I do have her at number 1. So I have to agree that her edit so far has been pretty good. But at the end of the day, it's tough because I don't think anybody this season has had like a clearly like flawless edit. And not that the winner ever really does necessarily get a flawless edit, but that always every season makes things a little bit difficult because you have to try to sort of figure out, okay, whose flaws matter more than others, and it's just, or who has more of them. And sometimes it's not an easy answer to the question. Or I'm going to bed after this recording. Because I think I just said that's not an easy answer to question. But you know what I mean. At the end of the day, though, that's the list. That's our rankings. It was a good episode, honestly. Not a bad twist, in my opinion. I was kind of worried about the potential for a, double duo twist, but I think it played out pretty well, all things considered. and made for a pretty entertaining and unique episode. So that was a lot of fun, and I'm excited for the next one. Anything else to add before we wrap things up, Connor?
I'm surprised it took so damn long for the Americans to try this silly twist. Golly. France
Golly,
been doing this forever, man.
not France.
You go look it up.
I think
You go
Survivors.
look it up.
They probably got it
France
from
has
South
done this, like,
Africa.
a billion times.
Mm-mm.
South Africa, I think, was the originator of it. But Survivor France, holy, go look at the list of times they have used this twist.
I think you mean Koh Lanta.
Ah, yes, sorry. Fake Survivor. France name. Point still stands. This is a storied idea that I was heavily surprised took this long to be tried in the American version of the show. And again, I
Ultimately-
didn't hate the outcome of it, but it
Ultimately,
could have been very bad.
it took us, the fans, to vote for it.
Ah, yes. We voted so clearly for this exact specific twist of it, and I'm so
I
glad
feel like
that's
my
what we
vote.
got.
I feel like my vote was well placed, even though I didn't vote for uh, maximum twists. To be honest, actually, whatever. Yeah, but yeah, no, actually, I genuinely think that this was a good twist. I don't really have too many issues with it as a concept now that I've seen it kind of play out. Like, I know it could have played out worse for sure, but like, I don't think that inherently makes it a terrible twist just because it could have potentially gone poorly. The only thing I changed about it is I would explain the twist to the players before having them actually choose their pairs. I just feel like that puts a little more agency on the players, which tends to make for, in my opinion, makes for better, like, more equitable gameplay, but it does remove some of the shock value from it, so I understand why they did it the way they did. Yeah. Anything else, or we get to wrap things up?
Just one or two more Survivor fun facts that I completely forgot to throw in earlier that I was going to bring up.
Fun fact.
Fun fact number one, Joe is now the first New Era player to have played the length of every American season ever. He survived 42 days. No other New Era player has done this to this point. So he has now outlasted the total day number of every American season ever.
The total?
And well, yeah, he's had 42 Survivor days in his career.
Yeah, the total. I think that's a bit of a miswording, but
Okay, point. He's survived 42 days. No individual Survivor seasons had more than 42 days. He's the first New Era player to do so. Second thing that I wanted to point out, this is also his 5th time with individual immunity, which I think is also a far and away New Era title to be chased if he continues to go deep into the season, potentially winning multiple more immunities at this point. I could see that as a possibility. It would be quite an impressive feat to see someone chase down Joe Hunter for the New Era Immunity Challenge title. And yeah, it's an impressive run that he's on with his immunity wins. Shame it does nothing for his odds of winning, but just thought that was a cool bit of facts about him.
all this glazing a joke. Call me when he survives 1,595 days.
Bro, what?
That's the total. That's the total days of every Survivor season ever.
I see. The last fun fact I have, Tiffany and Jonathan are now the last woman and man remaining from the original Kahlo tribe. Do with that information what you will, folks at home.
Waits. Sure. Alrighty. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Hope you guys enjoy the next episode of Survivor. and we'll be here to talk about it. But with that being said, the pod has spoken.